Blues Matters. Today we have Dave Keys. Where are you today?
I live about an hour northwest of New York City. So I'm in my home.
And how are things with you?
Things are good. It's been real busy. I'm really excited about this new record I have coming out. So we have a bunch of gigs surrounding that, and there's good energy, good excitement. And I just got back from the Blues Bender out in Las Vegas, which is a wonderful festival. So I did some work out there, and life is good. Little
Yeah,
crazy.
tell us about the Big Bender. How did you get on that?
Well, I've known the gentleman who's the music director for the whole event, a great saxophone player named Jimmy Carpenter, who I think has been over to the UK a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
And I play I do a lot of gigs with Jimmy's road band. When he goes out, he does his East Coast dates. But we've just known each other probably for about 15 years. We met we actually met on a blues cruise a long time ago. And then I was involved with a festival in Lugano, Switzerland for a long time. And Jimmy came over a couple of times and played over there called Blues to Bop, which was a great fest. And we just play together whenever we can. But the Bender, it's like 4 days of blues. I think I went outside the hotel once, it was 100 degrees. It's just, wall to wall music, and you get to see all your friends, and just the caliber of the music is really great. And the show that I actually did, it was a tribute to the piano, the importance of piano, and Jimmy and Victor Wainwright sort of created an arc of piano starting out in the 1920s with the early blues stuff, Bessie Smith stuff, things like that, and then carrying it through to the boogie woogie of the 30s and 40s and the big band music of that time, and spirituals to swing and stuff like that, and then how that translated ultimately into rock and roll, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and wonderful cats like that.
Talk about your musical journey. What got you into music in the first place?
I guess my mom was, into musical theater, and my dad liked music too, but he was more of he wasn't as actively involved. But mom said, you should take piano lessons. And so I started when I was 7, and I took classical lessons for about a month. And I said, I really am not enjoying this. And my mom was cool enough to say, well, what would you like to learn? And I said, well, I'd like to learn the songs I hear on the radio. So, which at that time, I think the first song I learned was Downtown by Petula Clark. And it sort of went from there. I had a good teacher. She taught me chords and how to read. And then I was also playing trumpet in the elementary school band. So there was some, I sort of got an idea how to improvise a little bit in a 12-bar blues from some other people that were in the band. And then when I was in 7th grade or so, I had a teacher that was a jazz player, and he opened up the world for me. And he said to me, if you can, he said, here are 20 tunes you should learn. And there were things like Satin Doll and, stuff like that, big band stuff and stuff that people played at weddings. And he said, if you learn these songs, you'll be able to work as a piano player. And I did, because I sing also, which I developed over a long period of time. I've always worked, and it's as a piano player, you can work as a solo artist, and that's really a good thing.
So big bands or solo, what do you prefer?
I just like good music, man.
Yeah.
I played in a swing band for about 10 years, either eight pieces up to 12, and it was top players. In New York, we had some steady gigs. We were playing 2-3 nights a week for about 4 or 5 years. And I love that stuff. I like to be a part of a large ensemble, but I also like, I play solo. I do boogie woogie stuff. I like doing duos with drummers. There's a great drummer in the UK named Steve Rushton who worked with Imelda May, who I met. And, we've done some duo stuff. I do duo stuff over here with Bernard Purdy, who's an incredible drummer. So anything and everything, man. My band is usually a 5-piece, though, with sax, rhythm section and sax.
And being on stage, how did you learn your stagecraft?
You just do it, man. There's different sort of chapters in my life. I don't get, the only thing I get nervous with is when I do Broadway. Because I've done a lot of Broadway stuff, and that stuff is kind of nerve-wracking. But when I'm playing my music, or, I played at Glastonbury. I played with Ronnie Spector at Glastonbury. I played, in China for, 10,000 people. I played, when it's my own thing, there's nothing to be nervous about. You go out, you do your thing. And but developing your stagecraft, you just do it. I mean, that's what I had the advantage of growing up when I did. I was working, from the time I got out of college, which was 1979. Up until a couple of years ago, I was working 5, 6 nights a week. It just was the nature of what I did and who I was, whether I was touring or if I was doing Broadway or if I was just doing my own band gigs. You get better by doing it, and not by sitting in a room with and yeah, you can make really good music sitting in a room with a computer by yourself and doing that too, but it's a different thing. So I learned by hard, school of hard knocks.
And what is it about the piano that you particularly like? I mean, what got you into playing the piano instead of anything else?
Well, it was the instrument we had in the house at the time.
Right.
So that was easy. But over the years, what I really like about the piano is, like I say, uh, I can play for 1,000 people by myself, and I can carry it. The piano is a percussive instrument. I'm a pretty percussive player. So in the old days, in the 20s and the 30s, with the great swing players and cats like Meatloaf Lewis and Fats Waller and those guys, you had a boom 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 boom. You didn't need a band. They would play rent parties and people would dance. That's what you did, and that's what I really love about the piano is I can get a room dancing by myself.
And Boogie Woogie in particular.
Yeah, man, boogie's great. I've sort of I was always into it. It just is something that I I keep coming back to, and I just really enjoy it. It's part of the
Mhm.
roots of rock and roll for one thing. Again, when I was in high school, there were guys like Willie Lyon Smith, Hubie Blake, and Earl Hines, and even though they're more swing players and some ragtime stuff. That stuff it really influenced me. Just the fact that how big an imprint you could make on a stage by doing that and singing too, that really helped too. So, but the boogie
And
stuff is great, man. I love it.
and where does the blues fit into your play?
Where does the blues what?
Fit into your play?
Well, it's always been there. When
Mhm.
I was, uh, when I was growing up, I think the records, I was exposed somewhat to in the 60s, some of the first wave of the guys that were influencing the English players, Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and things like that influenced the Stones and everybody else and the Beatles. But the blues was always there. But I remember one day I went to the record store and it's funny how you come to things. I bought a Allman Brothers album, Live at the Fillmore East, and I bought a Jefferson Airplane album, Bless Its Pointed Head. And both of those, the Allman Brothers was all blues-based stuff. And, in those days, you got a record and you read it like it was the Holy Grail. You saw a name like, you saw who wrote the song, and you see Howlin' Wolf and you see McKinley Morganfield. And then you'd go back and you'd look these guys up, in an encyclopedia or wherever you did in those days. You didn't go on the internet because you didn't have it. But, it forced me to dig back deeper into the history and it just always stayed with me. I love it, man. It's music of the heart, of the soul. And so the blues it's like a tree. Music is like a tree. And to me, the blues is kind of the roots of it all, and there's all kinds of stuff for jazz and anything, Latin, it all branches from there.
And who's been your influences on your music?
Well, I think, I've been partial to, there's three guys that I always say, Ray Charles, Leon Russell was a big influence on me just because when I was in high school or, 14, 15, and I was really getting into it, he was sort of a big guy. Him and Elton John were the piano players that led the band. And Elton was great, but Leon to me was a little more sort of dirty, a little gospel and blues and greasy. And, Elton's a fantastic piano player. as I came to learn. But Leon had this octave style. He just had this really, he played octaves. And when I was playing in bands in high school, you either played a Fender Rhodes or you somehow played an acoustic piano. And if you played an acoustic piano, you had to be heard over all these guitar players that were playing too loud. So the octave thing really worked for me. It cut through. So that just became a part of my style of playing. So and Ray Charles is just from a singing standpoint, and he was a great player too. But just the soul in his voice is something that I always, just loved. And then there's, people like Jerry Lee and Professor Longhair. I would say that would round it out.
That's about rounding everything up, isn't it?
Yeah. It covers a lot of ground, and it's just great stuff.
And any stories you can tell from the road? I mean, you've played with a lot of people. Come on, spill the beans.
Well, stories from the road. I mean, the first time I played with Chuck Berry, we were, it's a guy from St. Louis who was a bass player on the gig. He somehow got the gig, and we were playing in Rhode Island, and I was in college at the time. I think I was 19, and my friend Bob said, well, let's get there early. We'll get there like 4:00. I said, okay, fine. So we got there at 4:00, and 6:00, 7:00, 7:30, 7:45. The show was 8:00, and Chuck hadn't got there yet. And there was no rehearsal or anything. And so we, we're sitting there in a dressing room that was separated by I don't know what you call it in the UK, but we call it an accordion door. So it's a door a wall that kind of opens up. Okay. So Chuck's dressing room was on one side, our dressing room was on the other. So, it's 2 minutes to 8, and we're supposed to go on in 5 minutes, and not a word has been said. And so we hear that Chuck is in the other room, and I have to clean this story up a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. So my friend, he knocks on the accordion, which is like cloth kind of, and there's no response. So he kind of opens the accordion door and he kind of sticks his head in just a little bit. And I'm right behind him, like looking over his shoulder, like I'm 19, and my friend says, excuse me, Mr. Berry. And I hear this voice, excuse me, Mr. Berry, what do you think you're doing, young man? What if I was in here, and this is the part I clean up, making love to a woman? Wouldn't that be really rude? And my friend, who had a pretty good sense of humor and was pretty centered, he sort of pulled back and chuckled a little bit. And he said, well, Mr. Berry, yes, if you were doing that to a woman and I stuck my head in, that would be kind of rude. And at which point, Chuck kind of loosened up a little bit and he said, don't worry about it, man. Just watch my foot. When my foot goes up and comes down, that means the song's over. And just follow me. And that was it. And that's what we did. That was the introduction to the rock and roll king, But, Chuck was great, man. I got along great with him because he didn't like piano players that would do a gliss, because that reminded him of Jerry Lee. And he couldn't stand Jerry Lee because that time that Jerry Lee blew, put the piano on fire, and they were fighting about who was going to go on last. And finally, Jerry Lee said, okay, I'll go on first. And then he set the piano on fire. And then Chuck had to go on after that. But so I played with Chuck probably, 8 or 9 times after that. And we always had a good time,
And any stories about Popa Chubby? I mean, you played with him for a while.
Yeah, everybody's got a story about Popa Chubby. Ted and I have been friends since the early 90s. We were both New York guys. I give him all the credit in the world because he was nothing. He's a self-made man, and he's popular in the States, but he was extremely popular in Europe. We played Germany and France and places, some stuff in the UK too, but not as much. But, huge crowds, and people would love him, and he'd play 3 hours every night. And on a lot of those gigs, I was the opening act, so I would do solo. I would open the show solo. We played the Olympia in Paris several times, and for me to go out there and do a solo, 30-minute set before going on with him was was one of the highlights of my life. Papa's he's his own man. He's a volatile guy, and he's a loving guy. He's he's a very passionate guy. So there are all kinds of stories about him and Soundman. But and he's going through a really rough time medically right now. He's got a lot, some very serious medical issues, and so my heart goes out to him for that. The stories with him were just about really the intensity that he brings to a show. And they were some of the best shows I ever did. Rehearsing with him, and we would rehearse. He lives near me, so we would rehearse in a room that was not a big room, but it was where he did all his recording, and he loved to do his recording in a small room because he said it kept the live vibe, all the bleeding, everybody's playing at the same time, no overdubs. And that's what made for great records for him. But we would be rehearsing in this room and we're playing at, Spinal Tap volume. But that's the way he did it, man. That's the way he rehearsed. That's the way he played. And those are the stories really that's the stuff that'll always stay with me with him.
And what's the best advice you've had in your career?
What's the best what?
Best advice you've had in your career.
The best advice, I don't know if I got it from somebody else or I got it from a bunch of different people and I kind of assimilated it. But it was basically never saying no. As in some guy will say to you, have you ever played this kind of music? And I'd say, I'd love to. I wouldn't say whether I had or I hadn't, but I would say, sure, let's do it. And that's how that to me was the best thing. And Monk, Thelonious Monk there was this piece of paper that was going around for a long time, where you don't say to a guy, you meet a guy that you really want to play with. You don't, hey man, I'm around, call me. But it's really about being present, and then when the moment comes, make sure you got your act together. Make sure you're ready for it. So preparation is huge for me. It's because I'm not there's a lot of guys that are a lot better players than me, way better players than me. But I just keep working hard, man, and I'm still doing it, and it's the same thing. It's the work ethic. So work that you put into it will be what you'll get out of it. And you got to be able to get along with people, I find. That's something that I've always worked with. I worked with Papa. I worked with Odetta, who is not easy to work with. I've worked with a lot of people that everybody says to me, whoa, how did you do that? How did you work with him for so long? It's like, hey man, you just make the connection, you play the music, you do the gig, and that's what it's about. And they appreciate that. Even the crustiest, nastiest person, if you can make that connection on stage, they're gonna dig it. They're gonna appreciate it. So
I'll talk about a new album then.
Yeah, I was hoping we get to that. So this record,
Two Trains.
Yeah,
Two Trains. What was the production like? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, this is a record that it happened over a period of time, at a time when I was sort of going through some upheaval in my life. Really, I recorded the idea of Two Trains for me is that there's, and I say this on the CD. I don't know if you got the CD or not, or if you just have the files. There's good and bad. And I'm not going to get too deep here, but there's good and bad. And even in the bad, there's good. And even in the good, there's bad. I lost my wife, passed away a couple of years ago. She had a great marriage for 37 years. So, but somehow, even through all of that, we managed to find good in every day, And so there's this duality in life that's going on. And it's going on in the world right now because things are just so crazy everywhere. It seems like things are crazy here in the States, but you got to find good stuff, So the title track, Two Trains, is a song about basically two trains running on the same line. They're basically they want the same thing, but they're going to end up crashing, So that's part of the overview of the record. There's some emotional stuff about loss. and about grief. And there's boogie woogie stuff about boogie until the cows come home, which is my nature. That's my go-to. There's there's a gospel tune that's called I'm All Right, which was basically no matter what you go through, and everybody goes through stuff, at the end of the day, I'm all right. And that's really one of my favorite tracks. It was a tune I wrote with Benny Turner, who was Freddie King's bass player, and my writing partner Mark Samuth, who I co-wrote most of the other songs on the CD with. So there's a variety of stuff. There's gospel. There's a country tune like just a duo with a great harmonica player named Papa Rosie, who's been out with the Blues Brothers forever. I recorded it one set of tracks I did with Bernard Purdy, like 4 songs. We did it like a year ago. And then I just needed, after losing my wife, I just needed a little time to kind of collect myself. So we did those tracks then, and then I came back to it the beginning of the summer, and I just said, I got to get this done. I got a lot of music in me and I want to get it out. So we hit it hard, and I got, Alexis P. Suter is singing on it. I don't know if you know her, but she's just a
I do.
Right singer.
And Vicky Bell.
And Vicky Bell, yeah. They added a lot, and we got some. There's just a lot of, for me, it was an album that kind of pulled everything together because I've always been into a lot of different things. I'm not just like a rock and roll guy. I'm not just a blues guy. I'm like a blues, rock and roll, boogie woogie, country, funk and gospel. I mean, but that's like why I was into Leon Russell, because he took all these different styles and he made them into a thing. So that's what this record to me is about. It's about pulling all that stuff together. And I was really pleased with the way it came out. Just the songs, I've been writing with Mark Samuth, and I think the songs are better. This is my 8th CD, and I think the songwriting on this is much better. It's just a big improvement, and everything is, I'm really pleased with it.
Do you have a process with Mike?
Yes. With him, I do. He will, but it's loose. I mean, sometimes I'll give him a lyric idea. He's a great lyricist. So I'll give him a lyric idea. He'll come back to me with words. We'll sit down together. We'll write the music. We'll tinker with the words. We'll tinker with some stuff. Sometimes he just comes to me with words, like almost like Elton and Bernie Taupin used to do, where it's like he just gives me the lyrics and I come back to him with a complete song. So that's the process. But these songs, we've been writing for about 6 months, and it was really a pleasure to write with him. I really enjoyed it. He comes over here and we just lay down some rough tracks, and, he takes it home and, we look at it, we work with it, and that's it. That's the process.
And where, for example, did Blues Ain't Looking For You come from? That's
a song about someone who is such a nasty person. The blues aren't looking for them, because the blues come to the people that have heart and soul and compassion and care. And this particular person, the blues ain't going to go to them because they're just so heartless and cold. That's what that one's about.
Is that a true song?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's true on a global level, but you can apply it to whoever you want.
And you boogie on out, the boogie till the cows come home. I mean, talk about that one.
Well, it's just, Mark came up with this lyric. I think I came up with the hook, and it's funny when you write a song sometimes, and then you realize how many times people use the lyrics that you've written, and they have no way of knowing that you've written the lyrics for that. So Boogie Till the Cows Come Home. That's like, I'm just going to grab something here. It's funny when you're verbalizing and talking about these things. It's different than singing them. So, Boogie Till the Cows Come Home, it's just, Mark, I think that, the chorus we both kind of came up with. Mark came up with the verses, but that's really the philosophy of my life, I just like to boogie, that's when everything else fails, just let me boogie, The use of the words, I mean, it's just something that everybody can relate to. That's where I was. I'm all right, but I'm a long way from right now. It's just a process. It's about grieving. It's about, it could be about death. It could be about losing a lover. It could be about just life being messed up, but we can all feel that way. And Papa Rosie just was perfect guy to put on that track. The harmonica stuff he played on there was just great.
Yeah. For you, writing that kind of song, was that cathartic for you at all?
Sure. Oh, totally. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally cathartic. I think that's one of the treats, one of the pleasures of this record is that I, I've been through a lot last couple
Mm.
of years, and I'm a pretty even guy, and my glass is always half full. But that doesn't mean that you still get challenged with certain things come up in life, and to be able to express that through this album, and each song really is about, it's either about love or it's about loss, and that's the two trains. That's this stuff is
Yeah.
happening all the time. And we can get sucked in by the one train and totally go off the track, or we can say, hey, all right, how am I going to deal with this? And that's really what this album is about.
And talk about what just happened.
Well, that's
Just.
that's a reflection of what's going on in our country, in my country
Mm.
right now. It's just people are just scapegoating people, and uh, people are getting snatched off the street. Good people, and that's what it's about. You read the news and you see it in the papers, and I go, wow, did this just happen? What just happened? It don't seem right to me. That's what it is.
But then you've got trust in love and fate on the other side of the coin.
That's the other side of the coin. That's right. Regardless of what's happening now, I still have an enduring faith in people kind. That goodness wins out ultimately, and it's a journey, man. It's a journey.
Yeah.
What can I say?
And Boogie for Patti with that song.
Patty's my wife. She would have loved it. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I always do a
Yep.
boogie. I always do a boogie woogie.
Yeah.
Well, it's not always an instrumental. I've done like "Didn't It Rain?" I did a version of that. But most of the time it's instrumentals, and that just came out. And it's funny
Yeah.
because to record that in the studio, it's a totally live track, and it's just you're just playing, and it's got all kinds of little bumps and bruises in it along the way because you're just going for it. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that track, and it captures, I think, the joy that my wife had for what she did. So just sending it up to her.
And you had Woody Man on Worrying You Off My Mind.
Yeah. Do you know Woody? Did you know of Woody? Yeah.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Woody, Woody was a special guy, and I met him through my wife, actually. But we met we started becoming friends maybe 94 through a man named Bob Tilling, who's a writer from Channel Islands, who was a Robert Johnson sort of, he did a lot of, I don't know, he wrote about Robert Johnson, whatever, but he was a great blues sort of historian and knowledgeable person. And something about Woody just was very special. He was one of the first guys to transcribe the Robert Johnson stuff back in the 80s. He taught a lot of people how to play in New York City because he taught at this place called the Guitar Center or something, the New School, I think it was. So in New York, everybody knows Woody. Anybody, it's incredible. And he was also the nicest, kindest guy in the world, and a lot of fun to be with. And we did some playing in the UK, and we went to China together. We did some playing over there. I played on a couple of his records. And we always wanted to make a record, and he came up here. That track was cut in 2018, I think. But he just came up one afternoon. We just played some stuff in in this room where I am, which is, it's just, it doubles as a studio, but it's not a recording studio by any stretch of the imagination. But we just set up a couple of mics, and I was playing and he was playing, and the feeling in that track was just, to me, it was just perfect. We just had a great time playing together. I miss him greatly, and I'm so glad that I was able to put this on the CD.
Have you road tested most of them?
Have I road tested them?
Yeah.
You mean played them live?
Yeah.
No, not much. No, I haven't.
Right.
Yeah, because a bunch of these songs were just written, finished, let's put it that way, over the last 2 or 3 months. So, and I was so absorbed in making the record, and then I was doing some touring with Jimmy. So over the next month or so, next 6 weeks, I have a bunch of gigs coming up in the States where we're gonna play the record. So looking forward to it.
So you'll have a release party and everything.
Yeah, we're having a release party. There's a club here called a Turning Point.
Right.
John Mayall title, but it's about an hour northwest of New York City, and it's been around for 40 years. And I used to play there every year with Popa Chubby, New Year's, for 20 years because we both lived close to the club. It was a great gig. And the owner's a great guy. We put one show up and we sold that out, and now we added an afternoon show. So I'm really excited about that, and I've got a handful of other gigs too. So it's gonna be a fun time.
And are you thinking of coming to the UK anytime?
And I'd love to come to the UK. I don't have anything on the books. I got a buddy over there named Steve Williams, who's a guitar player. Steve did a festival called the Willowman Festival. There was a big festival, but he had his own Willowman Festival. He lives up in North Allerton, up in the Yorks, I think it is. And so I would come over for that, and I've got to get on it. Like I said, the last couple of years have been kind of turbulent for me. So
Yeah.
I'm just hoping with this record, and I'm getting back to touring, so I hope to get over there real soon. I love playing over there. It's great. It's great. People are great. Everything's great. You speak English, but just the whole vibe, just the people are really, really, really wonderful. And I've been all over, I did a lot of touring with Ronnie Spector. We would go over there for Christmas every year. We play Manchester, we play Liverpool, we go up north, and I've been up to Scotland, and it's just great. And the whole country's, the whole area is great. London's a fantastic city.
One last thing, what have you to say to the great Blues Matters public?
Keep supporting the music. We count on you to come out to the gigs and support your blues societies and your clubs, because without that, we got nothing. And we'll be playing at home for ourselves, and that it's not very satisfying. I like playing for people and sharing the love and sharing the music. So just please keep coming out and tell your younger friends, expose other people to the music, because there's a lot of really good young players that are coming up and out now, and there's a lot of good music going on. So I, for one, so appreciate your support, and just ask you to keep on keeping on, keep on doing it. All right, keep on supporting Colin. Blues
Absolutely.
Matters. He's doing a incredible job over there. Being a magazine is it's a thankless task in this in this era. But I am so grateful to be able to have an outlet for where people can hear my music. So I'm grateful for what you do, Colin. Let's just keep supporting each other here.
Let's do that.
All right.
Great speaking to you, Dave.
Pleasure, Colin.
Great speaking.
Sticking in with me. I appreciate it. Now we got it.
Cheers.
Cheers. Man.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.